I would like to ask for your impressions and thoughts on the outcome of yesterday's first day of the NATO Anniversary Summit. We heard President Biden's speech, the Ukrainian president's speeches in Washington, where he called on the United States to lift any restrictions on strikes on Russian territory, and the announcement of a significant strengthening of Ukraine's air defense. How do you assess these steps? Were they worthwhile? Assess the steps taken, anticipate more from the summit, and evaluate what we've heard so far. It is definitely important what was announced, but in my opinion, it is relatively more about the future. Billions of dollars are being invested in tactical and air defense systems. Dozens of anti-aircraft missile systems play a critical role, as we discussed earlier, especially in the strategic and anti-missile dimensions. Patriot needs to be covered. It's not very mobile at low altitudes. And in order to form an air defense in Kharkiv, for example, you first need to clear the Russian intelligence system that is over and around the city, and then you need to deploy Patriot, IRIS-T, and tactical systems and fighters in general. In the long run, we see that we are grateful for the billion, we are grateful for the approaches, but we also see that it is clear that there was no invitation, and we were oriented to that. And that's why I imagine NATO as a house. At the last summit in Vilnius, we were told, and for several years before that, about the houses in this NATO that will open either doors or gates or something, and we have reached the anniversary Washington. We were told, run, to get to this house, we have to build a city, so it's not like we come up and open something, but we have to build a bridge, walk across it, and get to a gate, a door, or something. But this is geopolitics in relation to NATO's prospects in 10 years or so. We are more interested in the present, although the strategy of this accession is also important. As for air and missile defense, we are grateful and have said that there will be prospects. But I would like to draw attention to the fact that we have been talking for 6 months about 7 batteries of missile defense systems. The decision was gradually being made, 5 were adopted, and it was said that a very powerful statement would be made at this summit. We never got to 7, and the conversation has been going on for 6 months. The first of the 5 appeared in Germany, where our president was in Germany, and the others, although in my opinion, they can and should have appeared quite quickly, but again, the conversation was on 5. In terms of air defense, the discussion was about anti-aircraft missile systems, troops, more prospects. Well, there is something, thank you for that, but in order to form the system that their favises are talking about. By the way, the presidents and others who care about Ukraine's affairs have spoken about this indirectly. But the system is not only anti-aircraft missile forces, it is fighter aircraft, air defense systems that act against airborne enemy assets, long-range air defense systems, F-16 fighters. Only the ban applies. The rest could have been in place at the end of last year. There have been no changes. There were expectations of a powerful air defense, but this component is not there. The ban on F-16s is for European aircraft, not American, but the ban is American. The Swedes are ready to produce Gripen, which are better for us in terms of their use, but the ban is American. We were offered 2 UAVs, again from the Swedes. By the way, I have been on an aircraft carrier, an old one, but the system is similar. The old American carrier-based Hawkeye to make the F-16s work better, because there won't be many of them at once. We know that, and the weapons are not superior to Russian ones. Yes, that's right, we know that too. To get out of this situation, we need long-range regression detection and control aircraft. For the F-16, it can be Hawkeye or it can be Swedish, but there is a system there. It is generally integrated. For the Americans, a single Hawkeye is worthless in terms of defense, but that's the way it is, so we need to build a system that is still being discussed. Defense does not mean only shooting down these air attack weapons when they are flying. It means hitting them everywhere, starting with the factories where they are produced, the warehouses where the same guided bombs are located, and the airfields where these guided bombs are attached to aircraft, and then they perform missions in Ukraine. That is, the hope was to increase the range of our old ATAC-MS tactical missiles, but we need them, and we can use them effectively. This also did not happen. So I started and end with gratitude to the Americans, our allies, but they have their own view, their own arguments about the prospects for the formation of an air and missile defense system over Ukraine. Your remarks are excellent, Mr. General. I'd like to ask you another aviation-related question. Because many people expected, and there were public reports in the press, that the F-16s might arrive just in time for this NATO summit, that is, the announcement of the arrival of F-16s in Ukraine might be made officially just these days, when the NATO summit is taking place in Washington. This is not happening, as we see, and you also mentioned a number of requirements for this support system. Support for F-16s, multi-role fighters, radar, target detection aircraft, which are in the process of being announced, so to speak, that there are countries that are ready to provide us with them, but it is still not clear how it will all work together, where it will be based, and so on. A lot of questions arise. Does this mean that the announcement of the transfer of F-16s to Ukraine is again postponed for an unknown period of time? When can this happen? Or maybe this information is already being kept absolutely top secret because it is a sensitive topic, and the Russians are now actively trying to hit our air bases and airfields, realizing that the appearance of the F-16 could turn the war around or become a significant factor in favor of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Disappointment in several areas. Firstly, the F-16 and the Gripen and Mirage will come in, but it's not a silver bullet. That is, the potential of air defense fighters and attack aircraft to hit ground targets will gradually increase. Secondly, the relative information. I am convinced and I defend the position that F-16s could have appeared at the end of last year. Everything else is artificial, information from the Americans. They discredit politicians, militaries, and Europeans, damaging their reputation. Brown claimed that the F-16 would be here by now. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But we will see how well this is realized, because they are already moving it from summer to fall. There are difficulties, there have been, there are, and there will be more, because there are no limits to improvement and no threats. As for what will appear and whether they can be shot down, yes, they will be shot down. Just like our pilots who are flying missions in difficult conditions are shooting down MiG-29s, Su-27s, 24s, and 25s, because this is war. But we need a tool to make it seem less like the Russians in order to fight it, and we need to be decisive and make decisions about it. Therefore, I propose that whenever new information arises, we adopt the approach used with the F-16s, consistently attributing the debunking of Russian propaganda to the Americans. They've taught us valuable lessons. We've seen over 6 months that their slogans often don't match their actions, which has significantly assisted the Russians while providing us with no help during this period. Although at that time there were Israelis in line whom they were helping, and Taiwan, to whom they claimed to be giving modern weapons. There is a difference. We took off the glasses, so to speak, from our eyes, who had what kind of glasses, pink or otherwise, and we became more pragmatic. The rational approach is that they say what they do. When, after Okhmadit, their White House representative said that their situation with the lifting of the ban would not change, let's see how determined he was in this. Everyone expected change and a reaction. We remember how Hamas artificially formed and then attacked their hospitals and spread the word. What was the reaction of the world? I don't think that any children are better, whether Arab or Ukrainian, or any children who are destroyed by the enemy and aggressor. But we see what is happening. That is, the Americans did not advise the Israelis to do anything. We were transferring weapons, and at that time we were transferring F-35s and 2 types of aircraft bombs. So we have learned to see, we have learned to be rational, we have not forgotten to think, and we are doing so. But our position has now become more pragmatic. We expect concrete actions. Mr. Ihor, we have literally 2 or 3 minutes left on the air, so you mentioned the speech of Mr. Kirby, the representative of the White House. He firmly stated that even after the strike on Okhmadit on Kyiv, the U.S. position on precision strikes deep inside Russia would not change. President Zelensky spoke in Washington yesterday at the Reagan Institute and again raised this issue in his speech. Zelensky called for permission to strike targets deep inside Russia at distances of more than 100 kilometers or more. Do these statements still matter, given the White House's official position we heard just before Zelensky's visit? We have to fight, we have to engage in military diplomacy. But I sympathize with our leadership, because unlike us, in fact, I try to be correct. I can argue and express who is doing what. But their situation is more complicated. But the fact that they did not attend the opening of the festive anniversary summit, which is not very much, has not given us much so far. His speech at this Reagan Forum, which in itself, in my opinion, speaks to this reaction, i.e. it is as a Povian language. Something can be said and something can be shown by actions. And therefore I am in favor of Ukrainians doing more to help their Ukrainian defense forces in this struggle, in this war, for the existence of our state, our people. We rely on ourselves, on our strength and our unity. First of all, our partners and allies are good, but they will not win this war for us. As we know, we have to take the initiative and bring our victory closer. Thank you very much for the conversation, for your frank answers. Romanenko was in touch with us, and we talked about what we had already heard at the NATO summit on the first day. What promises and announcements, proposals for Ukraine.